Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania.
Where we discuss history and hauntings.
Today's story takes us not to Pennsylvania, but to the Yule monsters of various cultures. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
Let's get into it. So, researching this was really interesting to me. I was familiar with some of these stories because I took the Russian fairy tales class in undergrad.
Yes.
Yeah. So some of these are familiar, but we're going to be talking about three different monsters. Krampus is the first one, and I think the most popular. Then we have Gryla and her Yule cat. And then we have Frau Perchta. I'm probably butchering that name. So starting with Krampus, we'll talk about the history, and the haunting is kind of mixed in with all of these histories.
Right.
So Krampus originated in Central Europe, and they are a half goat, half demon monster that punishes misbehaving children at Christmas time.
Okay, interesting.
And he's like the foil to Saint Nick.
Oh,
Right.
okay,
So,
that makes sense.
Have you heard of Saint Nick Night? This was a thing in the Midwest growing up, but I don't think it's a thing in Pennsylvania.
No, I've actually never heard. You said Saint Nick Night?
Yeah. So
Ooh.
it's earlier in December, and you like get candy in your shoes and like smaller gifts. It's like a prelude to Christmas.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So that was my experience with it. But since he's the foil to Saint Nick, that's also Krampus night when he comes around to punish the children.
Oh.
And so he originates from Germany, and his name is just derived from the German word Krampen, which means claws.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Intense. An intense Christmas monster.
Yes. And he was thought to have been part of pagan rituals for the winter solstice. And according to his legend, he's the son of Heel or Hel, which is the Norse god of the underworld. So like Hades, but Norse.
This is super intense.
Yeah. And with the spread of Christianity, he became more associated with Christmas and less associated with the underworld.
Right.
And this is despite the attention that the Catholic Church gave to him by trying to ban the concept of Krampus. So like I said, he's a foil to Saint Nick, so he's associated with Christmas, and the Catholic Church kept saying, you can't talk about him, we're not gonna give him any attention. But as typically happens with banned stuff, his popularity soared.
Right, and it's interesting because Eastern PA, I feel like we didn't have the Saint Nick Night thing.
Yeah.
So for us, which I think maybe across the country, but for us it was more focused on like Santa either left presents for you or he put coal in your stocking.
Right.
Like there was no Krampus, and so maybe on the eastern side of the US it kind of got diminished.
Yeah,
a little
maybe.
bit.
Maybe.
You
I
know?
mean, growing up, I only knew about St. Nick. I didn't know about Krampus.
Yes.
Because I think it would have been terrifying.
Oh, God, yeah.
If my parents were like, you either get candy in your shoes or this monster with claws comes and punishes you.
Right.
So-
I don't know that would instill the right kind of fear to be good. That's
Right.
like trauma.
Right, trauma. So when Krampus arrives, it's December 5th, is St. Nick night. When Krampus arrives on that night, he judges if the children are naughty or nice, and if they're naughty, he will go through their yard picking up branches and sticks to beat them with.
Holy Christmas.
Holy Christmas. In some cases, if they're particularly bad, he will eat them or drag them to hell. And so on December 6th, which is St. Nick's Day, the children awaken to either find the candy in their shoes or to nurse their injuries, or parents awaken to find their children missing, is the legend.
Well, that makes sense to me. If I thought that I had been bad, I probably would run,
Right.
to be honest.
I mean, yeah. This has become a highly popularized thing. There's movies with Krampus in it. There's festivities.
Right.
There's a famous Krampus run. I'm not going to try to say it in German because I will butcher it. And it became an international sensation in 2020. It was right at the end or beginning of COVID, end of open world time.
Okay.
And people dress as Krampus and parade through the streets and try to scare spectators and chase them. Terrifying.
Yes.
And some claim that because of all of this pop culture things like the movie, etc., that's the reason for the expanding popularity of Krampus. But in Eastern European countries, this is still very much a legend and not at all like a funny pop culture thing. So they still tell the story of Krampus to try to get children to behave around the holidays.
I can't believe that people still do that because it does seem so archaic.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. And like you said, traumatic.
Yeah.
People say that Santa sneaking into your house is traumatic, let alone a half goat, half man demon with claws to beat you with sticks. Yeah. Exactly.
Worst case, you're eaten. Best case, you're beaten.
Right. Terrible. So that's Krampus. We also have Gryla and her Yule cat. And Gryla originates in Iceland. And this is the legend that I heard of in Russian fairy tales, actually. Gryla was like a common, I guess, villain.
Okay.
She is pretty old in her legend. She dates back to the 13th century, and she's known as the original Christmas witch.
Ooh,
I know.
That's interesting.
Her name, Gryla, loosely translates to growler. She's a giant troll or an ogre, depends on the depiction, that lives in the Arctic regions of Iceland and has a spiked tail. She doesn't communicate with words, she only growls at people, hence her name.
Hence the name, yes.
Similar to Krampus, she will kidnap and eat naughty children around Christmas time. So again, this is the whole vein of you need to behave or else.
Right.
If she comes for your children, unlike Krampus, where you're asleep and you can't do anything, you can buy her off. If you give her food or money or chase her away, she will spare your children. Chasing her away, from what I read, doesn't always work, but food and money does always work.
Okay, so this is like combination Krampus.
Yes.
But like opposite the Tooth Fairy.
It's like Krampus, but capitalism.
Right.
If there are enough bad children in a village, she'll just attack the whole village.
Oh my god.
I know.
With her cat?
We'll get to the cat.
Okay.
It's actually a whole family. It is said that she's so evil that she's had 3 husbands. It's said that she ate one of her husbands simply because he bored her.
Oh, dang.
I know. Vicious.
Brutal. Yeah.
So that's Gryla. And her whole family is full of Yule monsters, actually. So she has these husbands that help her kidnap kids. She has a bunch of sons that will also wreak havoc. And then she has her cat. So her sons and cat specifically are involved in additional holiday mayhem. We're not going to touch into all of the sons because she has a bunch of them and each of them are responsible for a different thing.
Okay.
But we both have cats and we love cats.
Yes.
So we're going to get into it.
Yes.
And for those of you listening, I'm 100% convinced that my black cat would be a serial killer. So, this story is kind of close to my heart. So weirdly, the cat will eat children who did not receive new clothes for Christmas.
So now this is on the parents, right?
Right.
Like, this is like the parents' responsibility to make sure.
Right. And what a weird lore.
Interesting.
So some versions of the story say that you have to not only receive new clothes on Christmas Day, but also put them on immediately when you get them.
Okay.
The other version is that you need to receive the clothes ahead of Christmas and wear them on both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day to avoid the cat eating you.
Okay. See, it sort of sounds like something that the parents would implement. Like, oh, we got you new clothes. You have to wear them.
Or
otherwise
else
this cat will eat you.
Yeah. Right. And so I looked into it a bit because I think it's an interesting legend. I think it's really interesting that the whole family's involved.
Yeah.
Gryla herself makes sense. Like, be good during the holidays or you won't get gifts. That's a common theme across a lot of cultures.
Right.
But the cat, like you said, it's weird. And it's since the 13th century, so it's not like it's like modern capitalism. Like, It's not a Valentine's Day.
Right.
So I looked it up, and historians think that the origins were to encourage the wool economy when it was still up and coming. And it would encourage both completing processing all of the wool for the year by Christmas Day, and it would encourage people to purchase it. So it would just push the whole economy along.
I feel like I'm so not surprised that this is sort of rooted in capitalism.
I was going to say.
This is just typical.
Yeah, I was going to say we thought it wasn't, but it is.
Right.
So that's Gryla and her devious family that, again, live in the Arctic regions and have spiky tails.
Yes, that's such an interesting story.
Yeah, we have one left. And again, I'm going to butcher this name because it's Austrian. It's Frau Perchta.
Okay.
And this is another pretty old legend. It dates back to the year 1200.
Okay.
And similar to Gryla, Frau Perchta is a witch who judges people and deals out either punishments or rewards. But this is rooted in the 12 days of Christmas.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's like every day you can either receive another punishment or another reward, depending. And she is said to dress in rags and have a large warty nose that is constantly dripping. So like a witch nose, I guess.
Right, basically, yeah.
Yeah. She walks with a cane, which causes a lot of people to underestimate her, but everything I read literally said, don't let her looks fool you.
Oh, God.
I know. So she particularly dislikes liars and especially children. And this is like a step up. If we thought Gryla and Krampus are bad, Frau Perchta takes it to next level with how specific her punishments are.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how it could get much worse.
It's just the specificity.
Right.
So she is said to scrape out the eyes of liars with shards of glass.
That's crazy.
It's not done. Additionally, her nickname is the Belly Slitter, named for one of her most popular punishments of ripping open your stomach and stuffing you with straw and stones if your house isn't clean enough or you didn't do all of your chores.
That is literally my worst nightmare. As someone who hates doing the dishes,
There you go.
I would be terrified.
You better do those dishes.
Or
She's gonna
be
rip you
stuffed
open
with
and stuff you with
straw.
straw and stones.
No thanks.
As these stories continued to spread, the church likened her to the female version of Krampus, also because she has an army of servants with her.
Okay.
And they are all half human, half goat, like Krampus.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting that there's a similarity because these two are from very different areas, right?
Not that different. Austria and Germany.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So similar.
Yes.
Makes you wonder what people were seeing back then, though.
Honestly.
Right,
Honestly.
So, again, she's much more vicious and
Right.
specific. There are still festivals today in the Alpine regions of Austria that are put on for her, but mostly they're for tourists, and it says that her popularity in being like a household legend isn't as high anymore. It's still sometimes used to encourage children to do their chores and keep the room clean, but it's much less prevalent. I think probably because it's so detailed and scary.
Yes. Yeah. Because, I mean, these are getting eaten by a cat. Definitely brutal, but scooping someone's eyeballs out is a whole different world.
Right. Or telling a poor kid, like, you didn't do your chores, you're gonna get your stomach slit open. Like, that's, how do you say that to your
Awful.
child?
I don't know.
So, very interesting. Those are our 3 Yule monsters that we're discussing today. We normally say, would you go to this haunted place? So instead, the question I wrote down is like, would you want to encounter these? Which I think the answer is obvious, but
I think I would be okay, maybe, with Krampus. And to be honest with you, I like the idea of like the Christmas witch because you really only hear about witches during Halloween, so it's an interesting twist.
Mhm.
But no
right.
to pretty much all of them. Like, Krampus is the least intense, but still terrible.
Yeah. That's what I think. Like I said, we did Saint Nick Night growing up. I never knew about Krampus until I was an adult. Actually, I didn't really know who Krampus was until a few years ago because downtown Pittsburgh, there's that night market, that Christmas night market, and they have
Right.
Krampus night.
Yes, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And that's where I learned about it.
Right.
And then, like I said, I knew Gryla from school. I liked being naive and not knowing these legends.
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
I think they would have scared me as a child.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So 10 out of 10 would not meet. If you're listening and you've heard these stories, what's your experience with them? Did you know them as a kid? And did you do St. Nick Night? Because I'm wondering where people did that. Thank you for tuning in for our special episode of not Paranormal in Pennsylvania, but instead Yule Monsters. And we will see you next Thursday for our next adventure.